I think our web app would be more user-friendly if this was a pop-up menu for the habits of mind rather than having the user type it in. Because maybe we don't remember it, or maybe we want to like sort and organize by habits of mind. And what if we type them in slightly differently? Things like that. So we should make this a pop-up menu. And this is a really good opportunity for me to show you like our next concept, which is how do we make a web page dynamic, or rather, how do we build the web page dynamically, meaning we can put code inside of it, inside our EJS file to generate content dynamically. So that's what we want to do next. And there's some cool ways we can do this. So let's go back to router.js. Get rid of this for now. Here's where we're rendering create entry. We can pass along additional variables to the EJS file and then generate HTML based on that, which is like super cool. All right, so we want a list of like all the different habits of mind, and we could certainly just type them in and make like an array of strings. But there's a cool feature in JavaScript in terms of how it connects to JSON. So what I want to show you is that I've already done this for you. Inside the server folder in the model folder is a file called habitsofmind.json, and it's a JSON list of strings. Okay, so I've made that for you. It's so easy to turn this into a JavaScript object. When I first learned this, I was like, this is amazing. There are plenty of times I like pick on JavaScript, but this is a really cool feature. So heading back to server.js, where'd my server.js go? Here. Oh, just kidding. Router.js is what I want. We can import this whole, basically we can suck that whole JSON file into a JavaScript variable. So here is an easy way to assign static data, like hard-coded strings, an array of strings in this case, to a variable. I'm going to say const habits of mind equals require. So we're using the same require function that we use to pull in other JavaScript files, but we're actually requiring a JSON file. And we have to get our path right. So right now, router.js is inside the routes folder. So I have to do dot dot. Dot dot means go up one folder level. So if I do dot dot, now I'm inside of the server folder. Inside of the server folder, I want to go inside of model. And inside of model, I want to go to habits of mind.json. So by specifying it as JSON and then requiring it and assigning it to a variable, habits of mind now refers to a JavaScript array of strings of all the habits of mind, which is so much easier than writing the code to do that ourselves, which is great. So keep that in mind for like static type data. And then here's the new feature with render. We haven't actually taken advantage of much of anything with EJS yet, other than including headers and footers. The power of EJS comes that we can pass variables into the EJS file and then operate on those variables inside of it. And so the way we do that is we add a second parameter or second argument to the render function. And we pass a JavaScript object. We're just going to do an object literal, where the property is the name of the variable that shows up in the EJS file, and the value is the variable in this file, okay? I'm purposefully naming these different names to make this extra clear. So habits of mind, the value of this property is the JavaScript variable in this file in router.js. Habits, the property in our JavaScript object, because this is our JavaScript object literal format, habits is the variable name we're about to use inside the create entry.ejs file. So this is a little bit more confusing than just like passing arguments into a function and having them be like mapped to parameters, right? So it's a little bit more involved. we could name these the same thing. And in fact, the shorthand is if I just said habits of mind like this, that shorthand says create a property called habits of mind and assign it the value habits of mind. I just want to be extra explicit here for our first time to make more clear the mapping of variables in this JavaScript file compared to when we switch to create entry.ejs. We have to use the habits variable. So let's do that. So before we had this line of code here for our habits of mind, but now we're going to actually make it a like a pop-up menu instead. So I'm going to delete this whole line, and we're going to use an HTML element called a field set, and we're still going to have a legend for that. And I'm going to call habit of mind. We're still going to have a legend. And then we need to define each element within our field set. Like think of these as like radio buttons. You click on one of them, so you can only choose one of the 14. We don't want to write 14 labels with 14 radio buttons. That would be really annoying. So instead, we're going to embed the JavaScript code in our EJS file to generate the HTML for us. This is what we mean by like dynamically generated HTML. So we're going to do less than percent because that's how we start saying like, hey, here's embedded JavaScript. And then we're just going to write JavaScript code like we've been doing for the last several weeks. So I'm going to say for let habit of habits. So I'm using that like that enhanced for loop that we love in JavaScript. So the variable habit will be assigned to each element in the habits array. And then we need to give each of these elements an ID so we can refer to it later, but we don't want IDs to have spaces in them. So we're going to even add some more JavaScript code here. I'm going to say const habit ID equals habit dot replace all. And I'm going to replace all spaces with underscores. That looks pretty legit. I think that's good. Oops, I kind of wanted that code. Oh no. Oh, I'll write it myself. Ooh, this is close. I'm going to hit tab and then we're going to clean this up. All right, so we've started the for loop. Notice here's the open curly bracket and we haven't yet done the closing curly bracket. That's important. So we have input type is radio. I like that. The class, I want this to be class equals habit because we're going to use that to select it. I want the name to be habits. And then I want to give it a value too. I want the value to be, here's how we embed the variable name. So here again is how we do our embedded JavaScript code. This habit here, I want to be this like JavaScript variable. So I put it inside of these tags to say, as you're running this for loop, substitute the current value for habit in here as the value for this element. And then we close it. We have a habit. We close out our label. And then we need to close our for loop. All right, we'll save this and like give you a chance to like get that all recorded. There's a lot going on here. It's hard sometimes to understand EJS files. I just want to be upfront because we're mixing HTML with JavaScript. And there's like the JavaScript variables and there's the HTML stuff going on. And every time we do JavaScript, we've got to wrap code in these types of tags. And when we refer to a variable in line, we wrap it in these kind of tags. Pretty similar. We just got the equal sign here, right? And so that we have to make sure our parentheses still balance. Like here's the closing parenthesis for this for loop here. So it's a lot to keep track of. Our pretty printer that formats our files for us doesn't do a great job with EJS files because it's like it kind of looks like HTML, but you got all this other crap in there. Um, so it can be challenging. So in general, we try to do as little JavaScript code in the EJS files as possible by doing more of it in the regular JavaScript files before we pass the variables in. But here we got to have a for loop because we got to dynamically build all of these radio buttons. So I do want to make two small edits. Um, I didn't pay close enough attention to my notes in terms of things that I wanted to do yesterday, but these are really small. Both of these are inside of createEntry.ejs. The first one is it generally works, but not always. And I'll be honest, I don't entirely understand why. But with this image element that we added yesterday, this usually works, but it works better when we add a leading slash here. So this is like a absolute path on our web server to where that PNG file is. So go ahead and add that extra leading slash here. And then the second thing I meant to fix, generating, you may have noticed like I was talking about this code yesterday where we were creating this habit ID and replacing spaces with underscores and all that stuff. We never use this variable habit ID. I think when I was first thinking through of how to do this dynamically, I thought we needed it, but we don't. And so we can just get rid of all of this code. We're not using that variable anywhere and we don't need it. So that was just a waste of time yesterday. So we'll get rid of that too. So those were the mistakes I made yesterday that I noticed after the fact. But what we want to do today, because right now nothing really runs because we haven't yet implemented this createEntry.js file. So that's what I want to focus on today is the createEntry.js file. So let's do that. Where is our create entry? Here we go. All right, so we need to change this slightly because originally when we first added this feature, we just had like a text entry, or rather we just had like an input where we typed the habit of mind, but now we have the radio buttons. So this line of code doesn't work anymore. So we need to delete this line of code and add some new code to actually figure out which radio button the user clicked on so we know which habit of mind they selected. So I'm going to show you a new way to use query selector all that we haven't seen before. So this is a more sophisticated select that selects all input elements. Oops. Of a class habits that are checked. Okay, so that's what's new. So I'm going to say const, yeah, this isn't quite right. Const habit of mind buttons. So that's going to be my variable. And I'm going to do document, oh, that part's good. Document.query selector all. The tag, the element type is input. So the class type is habits. So we have tag element type dot class colon like the state. Oh, thank you. So here's where we can select by element type and then by class and then by the state all in one command, which saves us writing the code from having to do that, which is super convenient. So what this means is that habit of mind buttons will reference an array of references to document elements that are input tags with the class habits that were actually checked by the user, of which there should be like exactly one, right? Or maybe none if they didn't actually click anything. So we should probably handle both of those cases. So let's do that. We'll say const habit of mind. So that will be our variable that will refer to the specific habit, that the value that they checked, which will be the name of the habit of mind. We have to be a little bit smart about this. So let's check. We'll say habit of mind buttons.length. If that is greater than 0, oh, that looks good. If it's greater than 0, the length of our array, then we'll get the value of the first element. There should only be one element, right? You can't click multiple radio buttons at the same time because we group them together. Otherwise, let's actually set it to null. This is the ternary operator, which in APCSA we tell you never to use. You're a year older. Try to use it judiciously. It's in like an if-else statement. So if this is true, then assign habit of mind this, else assign habit of mind this. Okay. So it's a slightly more concise way for writing an if-else statement. And you'll certainly see it in JavaScript code. So the reason why we need this is if they don't select any radio buttons and this code here executes, we would get an error because there is no first element in the habits of mind array, because that array would be empty. And we don't want our code to crash. So with this change, this is all it should really take. So if we run this thing, let's see if my server is actually running. Go to the debug console. That looks promising. Go to the client, start that. Great. Hit create entry. Oh, wait, I want to look at the console. So I'm going to say inspect, switch to the console so I can see stuff as we go. Choose today. What are we doing today? Gosh, I don't know what I'm doing today. I am persisting, making it through class despite being tired. There we go. And if I hit submit, oh, it didn't work. Huh. So I see the date I selected, but then I see a value of null here instead of what I expected. So something's off here. Anyone know what mistake I made? It wasn't intentional. So does everyone else get null in the log too? You get null? Still writing? Oh, still running. All right, well, let's take a look at the code. I must have made a mistake. So let's look at the EJS file. So here's my field set that collects all of my radio buttons. You figure it out? Oh, so the class is habit. Ah, okay. Let's change the class name. I think that's a better class name because it habits plural seems to make more sense. Thank you. So let's go to create entry.ejs, change where it says class equals habit. It should say habits plural. We'll save that. Go back to the client, refresh it, choose the date. Today, I'm still persisting. Paste my thing in, hit submit. Hey, there we go. Now it says persisting. Thank you. That was the bug.